Hello beautiful watchers, I'm the Dom, and as you can see, I've finally given in to peer pressure and agreed to do a Q&A. As you can see, I've come prepared. I've brought me some truth juice just in case the questions get a little bit too personal. Okay, well, let's just jump straight into it, shall we? Jonathan asks, what was your inspiration for starting Lost in Adaptation? You know, I genuinely don't actually know. I was kind of doing this show long before it was a show, if you know what I mean. Every time a film that was based on a book came out, I was trying to explain to my friends why certain changes were terrible mistakes. The advantage to doing it as Lost in Adaptation is you guys actually want to hear what I have to say and don't just want me to shut up and get back to playing Mario Kart. Rayday asks, who made you a reader? That is, who introduced and or encouraged you to love reading and books? That would mostly be my dad and my big sister. They sort of led by example. Every time they didn't have something to do, they were reading a book with a look of utter contentment on their face, so I just kind of wanted in on that. It certainly didn't hurt that my dad had like 17 shelves of books at home. Tim Marsh asks, while I may not be the first person to ask this, I notice you sometimes drop the middle tay syllable from adaptation, so just say adaptation. While the internet recognises this as an uncommon but valid alternative to the word, I only ever hear it from you. Is that a region pronunciation from the part of the UK you grew up in? Yeah, I do actually get that quite a lot. It's genuinely perplexing to me that some people seem to take offence to me saying adaptation and adaptation if I'm not specifically saying the title of my show. They are synonyms, and as far as I'm aware, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, it comes from the word adapted. I mean, you don't hear Commander Worf saying, Captain, the Borg have adaptated. As to the regional dialect thing, I don't know, maybe? I don't actually have the accent of where I grew up, as I was raised just over the Mersey from Liverpool, and I sure as fuck don't have a Scouse accent.
He walked in there, wrote, I am a fish, 400 times, with a funny little dance and fainted.
My accent sounds more like I'm from Cornwall or something, which is a little bit weird to be honest, because I've never actually lived that far south and no one else in my family talks like this. Lee Gregor asks, what would you be doing now if you weren't doing YouTube videos? I guess I'd probably still be working full-time in a call centre. Hi, you're through to Dominic. How can I be verbally abused by you for stuff that isn't my fault while I slowly die inside today? Ben Everett asks, do you get the same enjoyment out of reading a novel or watching a film for a video that you would if you were just reading or watching it for fun? Ooh, good question. Novel yes, film no. I can enjoy the book regardless, but if I'm watching the film for the show, I tend to be judging it and deconstructing it in my head even while I'm still watching it, and that can get a little tiresome. My dear friend Jamie asks, how do you feel about when a novel is adapted and the location and or time period is changed? Do you feel it takes away from the original story? For example, Mr. Popper's Penguins and I Am Legend? I don't think it's a deal breaker as such in regards to it being a good or bad adaptation as long as it's done well, but I do think it definitely reflects a certain laziness from the filmmaker. It's obviously a lot easier to film something in the present day because you don't have to worry about the architecture in the background or the cars on the street or the iPhone in the extra's hand. That unwillingness from the filmmaker to go the extra mile always ends up affecting the rest of the movie as well, so yeah, it's usually a bad sign if it shows up. Jamie goes on to ask, how do you feel about authors who have extreme controversy in regards to their work? For instance, the fact that Cassandra Clare's Mortal Instruments was plagiarized from others' fanfiction, and even other authors' work as she bullies many people, or the real author of I Am Number 4 not being able to reveal themselves, not only still getting published, but getting movie adaptations of their work to profit from. Yeah, it sounds like she's a total bitch. I doubt you'd find anyone in favour of that kind of behaviour. Adam Clay Dennis asks, well, I guess the only question I have is, what inspired you to do reviews? Well, like I said before, I was actually kind of doing reviews long before I was making the show or even knew what I was doing. Adaptations just seemed like a really good subject of conversation. In regards to the web series, I kind of started that because Doug Walker did a video saying Chan Lawson was doing a talent pickup, and I saw a chance to be part of one of the very, very few filmmaking communities that lets you have 100% creative control of your work and make money from it, so I just sort of brainstormed ideas of things I'd be good at. Brandon Wright asks, do you ever plan on doing anime adaptations of manga or light novel series? I'm honestly still undecided on manga. It always seems to follow the same formula. First they make the anime, which is super loyal, then they make a few spin-off animated films which aren't quite as good, then they make a live-action movie which is almost always shit. Serpenthorpe asks, have you ever felt like your cultural background affected either your interpretation of a work or your ability to convey your feelings to your audience? Gosh, I guess I never really thought about it before. I guess it's inevitable that someone's background and environment would have a powerful effect on pretty much everything they do, but I definitely don't have the psychology skills to self-analyze to the point where I can tell you which parts of my background help me connect to my audience and which hinder. Lee Gregor swings back around to ask, how were you discovered by Chan Lawson? Well, I wasn't discovered as such. I sent in an audition video begging them to let me join with no sense of dignity whatsoever, and I think Rob Walker just felt sorry for me, to be honest. Amy asks, would you say that books or movies were your first love? What do you look for in a good book or movie? What would your definition of perfect adaptation be? Why do you think we end up with so many books being adapted into movies? And why do you think so many of them are bad? Not just bad as adaptations, but bad movies outright. Well, to answer them in the order you asked them, both it was a terrible love triangle. Many things, but the key points are good narrative, relatable and likable characters, and a climactic ending. You've got to have a great finale or none of it was worth it. Because filmmakers feel safer investing in a story that's already proven to be popular, and there's a guaranteed fan base to come and buy a bunch of movie tickets. Unfortunately, it always comes down to money. The perfect pour. Well, I suppose if we're leaving aside the obvious answer of incompetent, greedy Hollywood filmmakers, I have to say it's probably because even though both books and films are both a medium for telling a story, they're very different on several fundamental levels. So what quite literally looks good on paper might not work very well in other formats. Christopher Marino asks, are there any books or book series you would like to see adapted, and is there a series you think could or should never be adapted? I'd really like to see the Miles Volkowski novels turned into films at some point. I'm actually planning to do a whole video on him just on his own, so you'll have to wait for that, but feel free to look him up in the meantime. Answer to the second thing, brace yourselves. I really hope the Terry Pratchett novels don't get adapted, any more than they already have been, that is. They're just... I feel like they're so perfect in their current form, there's no way any filmmaker will ever do them justice, no matter what resources he has, so I kind of just want them to be left how they are in their perfect state. I don't know if that's cowardice or what, but if you disagree with me, that's fine, you know. It's just my opinion. David Perez asks, thus far, even though you have not covered it in the show, what is the worst adaptation you have ever seen of a book, graphic novel, or any other outside source? Do you have a guilty pleasure movie or book that you cannot for the life of you figure out why you enjoy it so? And finally, for no apparent reason, what is your favourite fruit? In regards to the worst adaptation, it's hard to say. You kind of reach a point with inaccuracy where you stop seeing it as an adaptation at all and just start seeing it as a film that happens to have the same title. To be the really worst in my eyes, it has to hit that sweet spot where it's just accurate enough to completely insult it. Of the ones I've encountered like that, I have actually made a point of doing episodes of them, and they are actually tied for the lead currently for most watched videos. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, I fucking love that movie, and I have no idea why. I mean, there's other films that I really liked and got excited about that no one else really gave a shit about, but I could easily list you the reasons why I love those. Abe is the only one where I'm just like, yep, I like it. No idea why. It's not a good film, it's not a good adaptation, it's just something that makes me happy. And finally, tomatoes, he said, infuriating anyone who thinks they're vegetables. Dominic Ford asked, which author would you most love to host a massive dance party for? I guess probably Stephanie Myers, E.L. James, and Orson Scott Card, but I have to admit the dance party would mostly be a clever front for a trap to lock them in a room full of belligerent weasels. John Tilliard asks, what is the single worst change, not adaptation overall, just single change that you've ever seen in any adaptation? I'm sorry John, I can't actually answer that without spoiling a joke that I've been working on for fucking years. If you want a hint, it involves a movie about interstellar hitchhiking. Christian asks, you have many times expressed frustration when the creator of an adaptation tells their own story instead of the author's story. Are there any adaptations where you would say the adapter's story was better than the original story, or is this something you simply feel should never be attempted? As a rule, I would say yes, I'm against it being done in the first place, hence why my saying is, if you want to tell your own story, write your own bloody story, don't warp and pervert someone else's to fit you. That said, there obviously are some exceptions. There's like Blade Runner, The Shining. I'm not saying those books are bad, it's just the films were better. Dr. 101 asks, do you feel that seeing the film before reading the book has an impact on whether or not you enjoy the film, as you don't have any preconceived ideas of how it should be? Oh my goodness, yes. That's like, you have no idea. Sometimes it's a single biggest factor. I am so much more forgiving of changes in the film if I saw the film first, especially if it was quite a while before I read the book. I swear sometimes I feel like I'm a baby duckling. You know how they imprint on the first living thing they see as their mother? I just imprint on the first version of the story I see as the definitive one. It's kind of sad, really. Alison asks, I understand if this is too personal, but in the Lost in Adaptation Jurassic Park video, we see that you have a tattoo on the back of your left calf. I think it might be a dagger. I'm always curious about people's tattoos. Is there a special significance it has to you, or some kind of story behind it? Well, it's actually the longsword of Richard the Lionheart. Not because I'm a big fan of kings who go on crusades, just because I really fucking like swords and he had a really nice one. The backstory is I was 20 years old and dating a girl who was really into tattoos. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. Amy Pollitt asks, do you have any kind of acting background, because you are super talented? Aw, thank you. But no acting background. I've got 2 degrees, one in film production and one in digital editing, but I've never done anything acting related before this. It's a funny story actually. When I first envisioned the show, I fully intended to have like a front man or woman doing all the acting stuff while I just worked behind the scenes. I was going to work the camera and do all the editing. The main drawback was, with the amount of videos I wanted to do each month, I didn't have anyone who could spare that amount of time for what was at the time an unpaid job, so I just in the end decided to just do it all myself. Before anyone volunteers to take over, I've kind of gotten addicted to the attention since then, so there's no point. Brandon wishes to know, what sort of works, novels, graphic novels, etc., in regards to genre, time period, or any number of other factors you wish to take into account do you believe to be the easiest to adapt from, while maintaining an excellent to good degree of the source material? And in contrast, what sort of works do you consider to be the hardest to adapt from, and therefore will only garner a fair to poor degree of faithfulness to the source material? The easiest would probably be crime thrillers, assuming of course that you have some good actors and you're very good at revealing plot twists. The hardest would probably have to be something that's based around a high fantasy or science fiction story, simply because of the sheer amount of shit we don't actually have that's in them. These films always have to rely so heavily on CGI, and obviously that's building up a bit of a stigma at the moment because everyone's so sick of seeing it everywhere. Annie O'Leary wants to know, you mentioned in your Wizard of Oz episode that there were apparently quite a lot of metaphors to homosexuality. Could you point out the articles or analysis on that which you saw? It sounds like an interesting read. Sure, yeah, I can stick a few links in the video description, but I'd actually start with Rantasmo, one of my fellow Channel Awesome producers who specialises in LGBT subjects. He did a good video on this. Yet another Amy wants to know, do you have any favourite online producers who you think you've been most influenced by when it comes to video making? I don't think I could pick just one favourite. I'm a big fan of all the Channel Awesome old guard. I recently got back into Andre the Black Nerd, he's really funny. CGP Grey, he's a fucking genius, and everyone likes a bit of Dorkly. As to influences, I'd have to say the obvious choice is Doug Walker, the Nostalgia Critic. I just love the way he edits his videos. It's just like bam, 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 cut, keep it moving, keep it energetic, you know? I'm pretty much copying him with every single video I do. Mr. Overstreet wants to know, if they redid the Percy Jackson series as a TV show, who would be your choice to direct it? Joss Whedon, but I kind of feel like he should be directing everything. Well, everything that Edgar Wright isn't already directing. Alex Bryson wants to know, what are the best/worst books and movies that you've read or seen thanks to the show? Well, I'm very glad that Lost in Adaptation got me back into reading Percy Jackson. I'm not saying they're the best books in the world, but I definitely got a kick out of reading them, and I read all the sequels, even though they hadn't been turned into films. Without going into what makes a book good in my opinion, I'd say that the ones that I enjoyed the most were A Princess Bride, Dracula, Howl's Moving Castle, and I probably would have really liked A Christmas Carol if I wasn't so anti-Christmas. As for the worst, I guess the sequels to Ender's Game were pretty appalling, but I didn't have to read those, I chose to do that. If I absolutely had to pick which books I didn't enjoy reading the most, it would probably be a series of unfortunate events, and don't be mad at me for that. This can probably count as my answer to all those people who asked me if nostalgia was playing a part in my judgment of the books and the films in that episode. No, I didn't read these books until just before I did the episode, and I have to admit I did not see the appeal of them at all. I'm probably going to do a video just on that. I'm going to do like a Lost in Adaptation additional for just why I didn't enjoy the unfortunate event books, so you have to wait for the full story, but yeah, that would be my choice for worst books so far. Andrew, Jonah and Patrick seem to want to know if I want to do any crossovers with any of the other Channel Awesome people. Yes, I definitely would. The main problem is that if I were to do a crossover, I'd really want to actually be there in the room with whoever I'm working with, not just cutting back and forth between us in our separate locations. The main drawback of that being, of course, that most of them are based in the US and I'm stuck here in the UK, so there's a geographical problem. Sharon wants to know, do you think you'll do a Damascus episode on stuff like Pride and Prejudice or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Well, for the Damascus to work, there's got to be at least 4 films and TV shows, and as far as I'm aware, for Hitchhikers, there's just the radio show, the BBC TV production, and the one film, so that probably won't work. Plus, I intend to give the film an awful lot of attention very soon, so yeah, probably not for that. But Pride and Prejudice, yes, that's on the to-do list for Damascus. There's also Dracula and Sherlock Holmes, so you can look forward to them as well. What failing point in an adaptation bothers you the most? Well, it depends a bit on what you mean by bothers me. If you mean making me angry, it would have to be when the book did something particularly clever or funny, and the film just did not get it. It just went over its head, and they fucked it up. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and the Percy Jackson books are rife with that sort of thing. If you mean things that really annoy me or really confuse me, it would be when I can't for the life of me figure out why they made certain changes, as that's just really frustrating to me. Like, if there's a clear advantage to the change, even if it's just laziness and they wanted to make it easier to film, that would annoy me a lot less, but it gets up in my head and it drives me mad when it would have been easier to film it the way the book did it, and the change opens it up to plot holes, but the film did it anyway. I mean, sometimes I just have to pause the film and just stare at it, like, why? Ans Dragonhard, sorry, you know what I'm like with names, wants to know, what's your favourite kind of pizza? Meat feast, yo, all the way. I'm like Ponyo, I'm just obsessed with that meat. With my current diet, I can't eat pizza more than once a month, and that is killing me. Merv wants to know, would you rather have sex with a goat and nobody know about it, or not have sex with a goat and everyone believe you have? Jessica wants to know, which one of your videos are you most pleased with and the least pleased with, and why? I'd say I'm pretty damn pleased with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Blade Runner, and Die Hard. With The Rabbit, it was because that episode took a lot of work to do, and I'm really glad it paid off. With Blade Runner and Die Hard, it's mainly because I really enjoy doing the little sketches where I'm acting with myself, or I'm just pretending to be one of the characters, and I felt those two in particular gave me an opportunity to do that, and I didn't feel like I was just crowbarring it in, because that was the stuff I liked. I felt it really worked well in those episodes, so that's why those are my favourites. As to the ones that I'm least pleased with, there's actually quite a few of those. I'm just excruciatingly critical of my older work. I can't watch anything back past Howl's Moving Castle or A Series of Unfortunate Events because of this. It's just pure trauma for me, trying to get through the older episodes. I'm just like, I can't believe I used to be that bad at it. So many mistakes, so many things I'd do differently if I could do it again. So yeah, that's why. To be honest, probably in a few months, I'll start looking back at even the middle range ones with the same sort of attitude. I know it's not the healthiest outlook, I just can't help myself. And I think that's all the energy I have for this episode, sorry. If I didn't get to your question, please don't be disappointed. What I'm going to do is, over the next couple of days, I'm going to go on Patreon, Facebook, and Twitter and try to answer all the questions I was asked there that I didn't have time to do in this episode. So, yeah, I will get to everyone at some point, I promise. Thanks for joining me, my beautiful watchers, and I will see you next time.